Hey everyone, welcome back. Have you ever wondered why your juiced up uber weapon fails to kill Acolytes quickly? Why some seemingly weaker builds and options easily 1 or 2 tap them? Well, you've come to the right video. Let's break down some Warframe science on what goes on behind Acolyte math. First of all, attenuation. Yes, Acolytes have damage attenuation. It's not as high as Lich's sisters and those of Archons. It also works differently, but it exists. There's a few very important exceptions to how Acolyte attenuation functions. There are 2 layers, a permanent 62.5% damage reduction to health, and adaptive damage reduction. The adaptive damage reduction is different from Archons and does not increase based off of sustained damage inflicted. Instead, it snapshots the predicted DPS of your weapon based on your builds and buffs, according to this wonky formula, and cuts the damage down accordingly. So no, you're not penalized for DPSing and failing to kill within a certain amount of time frame. Your maximum damage is already predetermined beforehand and fixed, and does not depend on your performance, unlike Archons. Yes, the higher DPS your weapon is, the more relative damage is reduced. TLDR, single highest hit you can deal to Acolytes without crits is 14,600. Critical hits are extremely important, because the crit is applied after the cap. Crits have reduced scaling, but still scale you much higher, which is the reason why you can actually one-shot Acolytes to start with. Now, you've never seen a white number Acolyte one-shot, right? And that's also why some of those slam builds I showed lately, the crit ones performed much better against them. And this is because it's actually impossible to one-shot Acolytes with white damage. Now, for the second bit, Acolyte damage reduction only applies to players. This is different than a few other entities in the game, but note that Sentinels, Beast Companions, Moas, Hounds, Spectres, and even Summons completely ignore Acolyte damage reduction entirely. While not as common, this can explain why once in a blue moon, you can see an NPC blow up an Acolyte with ease. TLDR, if you cannot see the damage number and it isn't your teammate, then that damage source will ignore Acolyte damage attenuation mechanics entirely. Spectres are very good at this when spawned against Acolytes in endurance runs, and a curious trick is Revenant's Enthrall changes the Acolyte state and also completely removes Acolyte damage attenuation, allowing any weapon to destroy them and seeing how much a difference the attenuation made. Now, for the undocumented third bit, Attenuation Implementation is actually bugged on Acolytes. Certain weapons interacted with it differently. Ever wonder why certain weapons seem to blow them up with ease and others struggle? I will classify weapons into Projectile AoE, Hitscan AoE, beams, and wave projectiles and traditional bullets. Melees function normally and are exempt from this third topic, and traditional bullets, they work normally. Now, Projectile AoEs ignore the damage attenuation part of the equation and are only subject to the flat 62.5% damage reduction to their health. Projectile AoEs represent all the common Acolyte killers you can think of. Spore Lacer, Brahma, Exodia Contagion, Glaives. Notice something in common? Each one of them can be launched, has travel time, and can be detonated in an AoE. These are the only weapon class a player can wield that ignores the damage attenuation of Acolytes. If you're ever considering what weapon to bring to deal with them, the golden rule is so long as it is a Projectile AoE and the AoE is its main source of damage, it will destroy them. Other choices include Stalta, Exceltra, Latum on a crit build, Catabolus Grenade Throw, and more. On the opposite end, we have Hitscan AoE weapons. It is not immediately obvious, but this weapon class is shafted by Acolytes. You can tell what is a Hitscan AoE weapon by firing at enemies from a distance. If there's no travel time, as in the explosion happens the exact instant you shot, then the weapon is Hitscan AoE. These are actually somewhat rare in Warframe's meta space. More obvious ones include Batacor Altfire, Ambassador Altfire, and the all-favorite Burstin and Karnon. These weapons all have 0 travel time and explode immediately, but here's the issue. First of all, some of them ignore multi-shot on the Hitscan AoE explosion, which severely nerfs their damage. That plagues the Zylok Incarnon and Batacor Altfire Shot. Second of all, the AoE of the weapon is more severely penalized by the damage attenuation part of the equation by unknown means. You know, that burst in Incarnon that destroys basically anything you point it at? Against Acolytes, it's only okay. Yet if I take this Projectile AoE weapon, a fucking stug, entirely because of the penalized Hitscan AoE, of which that is its main source of damage. Luckily, Hitscan AoEs are a rare weapon class, but be aware that these perform poorly against Acolytes. Beams are another case. Because Acolytes are status capped, status DPS oriented beams will perform poorly due to being unable to hold the full complement of status stacks they would normally apply. Raw damage beams also suffer because beam damage interacts weirdly with the damage attenuation equation. This probably has something to do with FPS, as the attenuation equation is based off of the game's tick rate, which is dependent on FPS. I would not recommend using beams to kill Acolytes. Ever try using a pure corrosive DPS Torrid Incarnon to shoot an Acolyte? You'd be surprised at how slowly it kills compared to everything else, right? That's the reason why. Do not use beam weapons to kill Acolytes, in general. This also means that the Tenet Galaxian added to the game tomorrow? Its beam mode will suck against Acolytes. I'm telling you in advance. Now, wave projectiles are the most simple. These include what is better known as the Archoplasmor family of weapon projectiles, such as Catchmoon, Archoplasmor, Lex Incarnon, Dread Incarnon, Paris Incarnon, Queller, Nadaruk Sinta, etc. Because the damage is attenuated on a per shot basis, these weapons are heavily penalized due to their massive damage per hit. This is normal and not a bug. As such, wave projectile weapons should only be used against Acolytes if you have excessively high crit. Viral slash setups and raw corrosive setups work equally well. Gas setups can get around the attenuation problem by causing multiple hits at once from gas clouds, which takes advantage of this weapon's class's frequent innate infinite body punch through. It's kind of like having multi-shot but outside of the attenuation equation. Otherwise, they will perform slightly worse than your typical weapon due to the heavily penalized big individual hits. Alright, here's the last bit before we get into the final showcases. I have these 3 weapons on my loadout. Let's see if you're listening. Which of these weapons is expected to work best against Acolytes? Correct. Because Exceltra is a projectile AoE rifle, it will be able to ignore the attenuation equation on the AoE, whereas a dual Toxis Incarnon will actually take longer due to being a traditional bullet hose weapon. How about this one? Yep. Even the Stug will perform better than the Ambassador, because the bullet hose mode of Ambassador is low damage and the alt-fire is a Hitscan AoE, whereas the Stug is a projectile AoE. Hopefully this info is useful to you all in understanding why certain weapons perform differently against Acolytes, and how to know in advance what will work and what won't, without actually having to go and test the weapon to find out. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've been doing with the Whispers in the Wall update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds. Don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.